The story began with the boys saying that they need to wait for mom and dad. The sister told him not to worry, because they would soon catch up with them. The boy also added that they apparently fell asleep and needed to be woken up. The sister added that she would definitely come back for them, and asked him to hold tight, so as not to fall. Meanwhile, the soldiers pointed their guns to begin shelling. A moment later, people's screams were heard, but the sister and brother continued to hold on tightly. The sister tried to calm her brother down so that he would not be afraid, because she was holding him. Suddenly, a soldier appeared who had already aimed his sight to shoot. Enemy soldiers received bullets in the forehead for killing ordinary civilians. The soldier who protected the children asked them to quickly run away, because it is dangerous here. Suddenly, something that was above them caught their attention. It was an enemy plane that was preparing to destroy all living things. The soldier jumped on the children to protect them with his body. The plane began firing one shell after another to destroy people. After a few seconds, the plane finished doing this and flew forward. The boy was on his knees and trembling terribly from fear and the events that he was experiencing. He looked at the broken helmet that the soldier who saved them had. He called out to his sister, but saw that it was most likely too late. The boy cried and asked her to get up again, as before. His sister told him to go ahead, and she would soon catch up with him. The boy replied that both mom and dad and she were lying, and asked her to get up quickly and walk together. The girl cried and asked him again to leave quickly. Meanwhile, because of the scream, the plane began to approach for a second attack. The boy kept crying and screaming for someone to help them. The soldier who covered the children with a human shield stood right in front of the boy. The soldier said he couldn't even pretend the boy was dead because of his loud crying. He asked the boy to stop crying, because the military men could only save him. The pilot on the plane continued to approach them. The soldier said that what will happen now will be a secret. He added that even if the boy tells, no one will believe him. A soldier launched projectiles made of water directly at the pilot of an airplane. Water bullets hit the plane, and it began to fall slowly. The plane exploded due to water bullets, and the soldier stood looking at the explosion. A moment later, clear rays emerged that made their way through the clouds. The soldier suggested to the boy that they let her go in peace. The boy continued to sit on his knees next to his sister. The sister smiled for the last time, knowing that her brother would live. The soldier said that the rainbow will show the boy's path, and his sister and parents will arrive safely. A boy asked a soldier if he was a god because of his superhuman powers. The soldier replied that it is not exactly as the boy says. The boy then immediately asked if he was Takebi with evil spirits. The soldier replied that Takebi is a completely different word from the word god. He added that people usually call him a Taoist, an adept who has devoted himself to Taoism. The soldier also added that his name is Jun Wukai, and that's who he is. After a while, BJ Chung Wukai started broadcasting how he was eating a large amount of food on camera. Jun Wukai said he welcomes his viewers, and he's already here. He asked his chat how they spent their day, and he was told that it was worse than his. Viewers in the chat started writing about his sweatpants and the hole in them, and Wu asked what was wrong with them. One of the spectators suggested throwing them away, and Wu replied that he would not get rid of them, because they were a gift. He continued that this item was a gift from a man who was grateful for his salvation in the war. Suddenly, a spider approached Wu's shoulder, and someone wrote about it. Wu shot his water magic at the spider that landed on his shoulder. Wu took the spider into the water ball and said that it's not even magic. He added that these were just Taoist abilities, and people began to argue whether it was computer graphics. One viewer suggested that Wu should participate in a talent show. Wu also said that he will not stop repeating that this is not magic, but only a martial art. His monologue was interrupted by the computer turning off, and Wu tried to find out the reason for its shutdown. Wu leaned back and sighed heavily, because live broadcasting is not easy. Suddenly, Wu heard some cats meowing behind him. He turned, and outside the window he saw his 3 musketeers. Wu felt ashamed that he didn't even buy food for the cats. He said that he would go and buy the cats something tasty, and asked them to wait for him. We walked down the street to the store to buy food for the cats. Suddenly, a black car drove up to Wu and honked at him. Wu asked why the old man came here again, and the guy in the suit replied that Wu should sit down to talk. Wu said he knew what the guy was trying to say, and the guy in the suit asked why Wu kept broadcasting online. Wu replied that the audience likes his show, and if he doesn't show his magic tricks, then they won't like him. The guy in the suit said that Wu doesn't know what he's risking if he reveals himself, and if he needs money, he should just say so. Wu got tired of the monologue of the guy in the suit, and his solution was to start disappearing. A moment later, only the water that Wu had was left near the car. The guy in the suit said to himself that it was just a clone, and even after living for hundreds of years, Wu has not matured. Meanwhile, at the checkout they told Wu that he was charged 9,021, including the package. The seller asked if he was BJ Chung Wu Kai, because he was watching the broadcast the other day. Jung Wu Kai smiled and thanked the seller for looking at it. The seller also said that he likes the show, but there is one thing that upsets him. He continued that this is the absence of a cute girl, and if she appears on air, the number of viewers will double. Wu replied that his broadcasts were primarily about Taoist skills. Wu thought to himself about where he could find a pretty girl. The girl who stood in front of him asked Jun Wu Kai if he would help her. Wu asked the girl who she was and why she was here. She started taking out something, and asked if he recognized it. The girl added that it was a relief that he remembered, and Wu said that he would find out, because it was his thing. Wu asked if Chairman Kang was feeling well. The girl replied that he died several years ago. Suddenly, Wu remembered the boy he saved. An awkward silence hung between the guy and the girl. A few moments later, Wu and the girl walked together. Wu said that so many years have passed since Chairman Kang left. The girl apologized for not telling earlier, because her grandfather always told her not to bother Wu. Wu asked if she was a granddaughter, and the girl replied that everything was correct, and her name was Kang Jinhee. Unexpectedly, they were a little surprised that some giant landed not far from them. The giant looked like a muscled man with red eyes, like a demon's. Wu asked what else landed in front of them. After a few seconds, tears began to flow from the giant's eyes. Wu said that from the outside, the monster looks quite dangerous. The giant screamed and mindlessly began to run towards Wu. The giant ran, knocking down various objects on its way that could interfere with its path. The giant stopped about 10 meters from Wu and began to prepare to attack. Wu asked the girl to stay behind him. A huge man attacked Wu to destroy him. Wu dropped his cat purchases near him to concentrate. Wu said for the big strong guy to come closer. While creating water energy, Wu challenged the giant to see what they could. A moment later, Wu closed the giant that attacked him in a sphere of water. Wu clenched his fist, and the water froze, into which the giant was locked. The ice began to crack a little from the giant's desire to get out. Wu yawned while checking his phone, because he was clearly not interested in the battle. The giant escaped Wu's ice trap a little, and was able to pull out his head. Wu said that this big guy is unusual for him. The giant continued to try to get out, and Wu told him to push himself a little more. Wu asked himself if he filmed this, would it get a lot of likes? He threw his phone at Jin Hee, and asked if she had seen his broadcasts, and she replied that she had. Wu asked her to film it, and the genre is combat action, so you need to try to catch the frame. Jin Hee was a little nervous, and said that she would definitely try. Taking off his tracksuit, Wu said that he would now take care of it. Jin Hee, not understanding the phone, asked herself if this is how it's done. Wu began to warm up in front of the giant, who was eager to destroy him. Wu shouted that they were going, and released the giant from the ice trap that was holding him back. As it turned out, Jin Hee, instead of just filming, started a live broadcast. The giant screamed at the top of his voice when he was unfrozen by Wu. Wu hid his hands behind his back and said that he was not an expert in hand-to-hand combat. He continued that since the genre of this video is fighting action, he will try to fight along with the audience. Having done a somersault, Wu hit the back of the huge guy's head with his foot. The giant stopped, and in the chat someone wrote that this is an amazing place. The giant attacked Wu again, and the viewer asked where it was, and was told that Junwoo Kai lives in Seoul. The giant tried to attack Wu, and in the chat they asked if this could happen in Seoul. Wu hit the monster with his foot again, but this time on the chin. Someone in the chat asked if people call everything a lie that they haven't seen before. One of the viewers wrote that there is such a place, and it could be both in the green zone and in the redevelopment zone. Someone wrote that someone like him cannot live in such an expensive area. Meanwhile, while the audience was chatting, Wu struck the giant's head for the third time. Jin-hee accidentally made sounds of surprise, and someone in the chat asked if it was a woman's voice. Wu continued to dodge every blow from the giant. He jumped again to strike with his foot. With his kick, Wu threw the huge guy against the wall. Wu said that he hasn't used his body for a long time, and it hurts a little. But the giant ran towards Wu with a furious cry to destroy him. The monster continued to run, and in the chat they wrote that the cat was in danger. Wu released his clone, who ran up and saved the defenseless animal. He shot at the monster with his hand, while the clone continued to save the cat. Wu shouted that it was an ice spear that hit the giant. A bunch of drops of water flew around the giant, which he was surrounded by. Wu clenched his fist to finally finish the battle with the monster. Huge sharp pieces of ice soaked into the big guy's body. From the pain that the pieces of ice caused him, the giant screamed and began to cry. A moment later, the giant fell at the feet of Wu, who stood completely cold-blooded. Wu thought to himself that he couldn't believe he was moving even after being hit 6 times by the ice spears. He also thought that this was an unusual creature, and would leave him alive, and take him to the old man. Wu asked Jin-hee if she did a good job filming. Jin-hee gave the phone to Wu, and he said that he would now see how it turned out. Wu noticed that in fact, Jin-hee accidentally turned on the live broadcast. Wu thought to himself that this was a complete failure on his part. Jin-hee asked what was wrong, and isn't he doing the same thing? They started writing in the chat that this is a beautiful lady, and she is so beautiful. Wu turned off the live broadcast, and saw that the monster had escaped. Suddenly, someone started calling Wu, and he thought to himself that he had completely screwed up. After a few seconds, tears began to flow from the giant's eyes. Wu said that from the outside, the monster looks quite dangerous. The giant screamed and mindlessly began to run towards Wu. The giant ran, knocking down various objects on its way that could interfere with its path. The giant stopped about 10 meters from Wu and began to prepare to attack. Wu asked the girl to stay behind him. A huge man attacked Wu to destroy him. Wu dropped his cat purchases near him to concentrate. Wu said for the big strong guy to come closer. While creating water energy, Wu challenged the giant to see what they could. A moment later, Wu closed the giant that attacked him in a sphere of water. Wu clenched his fist, and the water froze, into which the giant was locked. The ice began to crack a little from the giant's desire to get out. Wu yawned while checking his phone, because he was clearly not interested in the battle. The giant escaped Wu's ice trap a little, and was able to pull out his head. Wu said that this big guy is unusual for him. The giant continued to try to get out, and Wu told him to push himself a little more. Wu asked himself if he filmed this, would it get a lot of likes? He threw his phone at Jin-hee, and asked if she had seen his broadcasts, and she replied that she had. Wu asked her to film it, and the genre is combat action, so you need to try to catch the frame. Jin-hee was a little nervous, and said that she would definitely try. Taking off his tracksuit, Wu said that he would now take care of it. Jin-hee, not understanding the phone, asked herself if this is how it's done. Wu began to warm up in front of the giant, who was eager to destroy him. Wu shouted that they were going, and released the giant from the ice trap that was holding him back. As it turned out, Jin-hee, instead of just filming, started a live broadcast. The giant screamed at the top of his voice when he was unfrozen by Wu. Wu hid his hands behind his back and said that he was not an expert in hand-to-hand combat. He continued that since the genre of this video is fighting action, he will try to fight along with the audience. Having done a somersault, Wu hit the back of the huge guy's head with his foot. The giant stopped, and in the chat someone wrote that this is an amazing place. The giant attacked Wu again, and the viewer asked where it was, and was told that Jun Wukai lives in Seoul. The giant tried to attack Wu, and in the chat they asked if this could happen in Seoul. Wu hit the monster with his foot again, but this time on the chin. Someone in the chat asked if people call everything a lie that they haven't seen before. One of the viewers wrote that there is such a place, and it could be both in the green zone and in the redevelopment zone. Someone wrote that someone like him cannot live in such an expensive area. Meanwhile, while the audience was chatting, Wu struck the giant's head for the third time. Jinhee accidentally made sounds of surprise, and someone in the chat asked if it was a woman's voice. Wu continued to dodge every blow from the giant. He jumped again to strike with his foot. With his kick, Wu threw the huge guy against the wall. Wu said that he hasn't used his body for a long time, and it hurts a little. But the giant ran towards Wu with a furious cry to destroy him. The monster continued to run, and in the chat they wrote that the cat was in danger. Wu released his clone, who ran up and saved the defenseless animal. He shot at the monster with his hand, while the clone continued to save the cat. Wu shouted that it was an ice spear that hit the giant. A bunch of drops of water flew around the giant, which he was surrounded by. Wu clenched his fist to finally finish the battle with the monster. Huge sharp pieces of ice soaked into the big guy's body. From the pain that the pieces of ice caused him, the giant screamed and began to cry. A moment later, the giant fell at the feet of Wu, who stood completely cold-blooded. Wu thought to himself that he couldn't believe he was moving even after being hit 6 times by the ice spears. He also thought that this was an unusual creature, and would leave him alive, and take him to the old man. Wu asked Jinhee if she did a good job filming. Jinhee gave the phone to Wu, and he said that he would now see how it turned out. Wu noticed that in fact, Jinhee accidentally turned on the live broadcast. Wu thought to himself that this was a complete failure on his part. Jinhee asked what was wrong, and isn't he doing the same thing? They started writing in the chat that this is a beautiful lady, and she is so beautiful. Wu turned off the live broadcast, and saw that the monster had escaped. Suddenly, someone started calling Wu, and he thought to himself that he had completely screwed up. After a while, he broadcast that he was looking for a scoundrel who interrupted everything and ran away from responsibility. Wu showed the phone and asked to write if you saw it. Wu asked the audience not to talk about trifles and began to argue with them. Someone paused the broadcast on their tablet. Someone answered that they could not destroy it and asked what they should do. The girl asked if he thought it was impossible, even if the head were separated from the body, and the old man replied that he could change his appearance. The girl said that the moment where the monster appeared was corrected, and civilians arrived at the scene, but when they saw the whole wall, they believed that it was CGI, and left. Girlfriend added that they also contacted nearby residents, and told them to keep their mouths shut. Secretary of the Bongsan Group of Companies Yu Jena added that the Kang Jinhee family is much more influential than they thought. She also added that they believe the collapse of the house was a planned attack, from start to finish. The guy in the suit asked to select only those related to Jun Wukai's scroll, and Gina said that they couldn't. The old man asked if she wanted to say that all relatives are related. Gina replied that it would take at least 6 months for the Internal Investigations Department to obtain information. She held out her tablet and said it was an approval letter. The guy in the suit said she didn't want to dig under Jun Wukai, but it looks like she has some ideas. Gina confirmed, saying that Internal Affairs thought it might have something to do with what was asked in the beginning. The guy in the suit said it was bad, but that's not true. He said that the first thing they do is investigate the suspicious cult where Kang Jinhee's mother disappeared. The guy added that it was a hard fate and asked how she even got involved with this Jun Woo. The guy in the suit asked if Jun Wukai helped her at the surgery site. Meanwhile, Jun Wukai jumped from rooftop to rooftop in Incheon. They said through the earpiece that all civilians within a radius of 2 kilometers had been evacuated. They also added to his earpiece that they said that this was a training evacuation, and this area would soon be resettled, so there are few residents here. Wu asked if there were casualties, and was told that due to the fact that the lower part of the body was completely blown away. Wu said that he doesn't know how well he fights when there are a lot of enemies, and added that he's already close, so he hangs up. Wu landed on one of the pillars that stood in the middle of the street. Wu said that there is something good for monsters in a collapsing city. Wu began to peer into one side of the city, and said that he had found. He added that the distance is approximately 70 meters from this point where. Wu added that compared to these two, the previous one was a real gentleman. The guy also said that they seemed to be looking for something there, but in any case we need to go there. A few moments later, Wu was already near those two monsters, but they did not react to him at all. Wu thought to himself why they weren't attacking him, and guessed that they didn't sense that he was here. He thought to himself that this was what he was thinking about. With his vision, Wu saw that the monsters were imprisoned in some kind of sphere. He thought to himself that they were surrounded by some kind of field, because of it they could not see it. Wu continued his stream of thoughts, that he was impressed by this, even he can only feel it if he concentrates. He asked out loud if it was his doing, that he just saw. The guy replied that he made the field, and it blocks sounds and vision. The guy also offered to have lunch with Wu. He continued that he heard that dating is common in this country, and asked if he had done something wrong. Wu said that everything is correct, only the situation is not the same, and also thought to himself that he had not heard of a foreigner, so that another one could get here. The guy asked if Jun Wukai was interested in who he was. Wu asked how the guy knew him, and the guy replied that he saw his stream. The guy added that as a fan, he wanted to see live how he would deal with them, as it was on air. The guy continued so that we would not worry, because from here he could carefully get rid of them. The guy also said that one of the monsters will be on him. Wu noticed how the field that held back the monsters began to collapse. The monsters could no longer restrain themselves from attacking when they noticed the presence of people. Wu asked why they were suddenly staring at them. Angry monsters began their attack on the guys. Wu turned and said that, as agreed, he would take one on himself. Wu asked where that guy went while the green monster attacked him. Wu jumped and said that it was no big deal, and he could handle it himself. With his foot, Wu hit the green monster on the head that was attacking him. The monster landed face down on the asphalt after a crushing blow from Wu. Wu was attacked by a second brown monster with 4 human arms. He tried to attack Wu, but the guy successfully dodged his arms. Wu thought to himself that this monster is still fast. He also thought to himself that the second monster was much stronger than the previous one. Wu also thought to himself that first they needed to be separated. Wu jumped near a building to get higher. After Wu jumped, a 4-armed man began to crawl along the wall behind him. Wu thought that the one with the huge fists couldn't keep up with them. The green monster with huge fists suddenly screamed. Meanwhile, Wu has almost reached the roof with his jump. A monster with 4 arms immediately crawled after him, eager to destroy the guy. The 4-armed monster chased Wu while Wu was not too far away from him. Wu calmly jumped off the roof to go back to the ground. The 4-armed man continued to chase Wu, and also descended to the ground. Suddenly, tears began to flow from the eyes of the 4-armed monster. While falling down, Wu launched his signature ice spears at him. But with the help of his agility, the monster grabbed Wu's ice spears. Wu was surprised that someone could stop his ice spears. The monster continued to hang on the wall of the house, and held on to the ice spears. Suddenly, he swung and threw the ice spears back towards Wu. Wu stood in front of the ice spears flying towards him, and extended his hand forward. Instead of ice spears, droplets of water appeared around Wu. Water droplets began to change their shapes, similar to diamonds. He responded by attacking the monster with the diamonds he created. But the monster avoided being bombarded by diamonds by jumping. While the monster was falling, he grabbed Wu's head to destroy him. But instead of Wu, The four-armed man found only ordinary water. A moment later, the monster stood only near a puddle of water. Watching the monster while standing on the roof, Wu thought that the speed with which the monster caught the spears was excellent. He also thought to himself that the old man would have to excuse him, because he was unlikely to be able to take him alive. A guy standing on another roof asked Wu if they were having fun. The guy also asked if Wu deliberately does not use high techniques that will destroy monsters. He also suggested that perhaps this battle was his limit. Wu replied that he was asked to take them alive whenever possible. The guy asked why anyone needs living monsters, and Wu replied that most likely to come up with countermeasures. The guy said it sounded like there was an organization in this country for such purposes. The guy also added that Wu should be a little more careful there. Meanwhile, Wu was attacked by a four-armed monster that wanted his death. Wu jumped to retreat from the attack of the four-armed monster. But the monster found itself near Wu again, in a short period of time. He tried to attack Wu with both hands, but the guy dodged the blow. As it turned out, the monster attacked Wu's clone, and the real one was already above him. With his water attack, Wu pierced the monster, and it began to fall. Wu, in order to finish off the monster, froze the water in order to neutralize it. Wu began to lift the ice spikes containing the monster with his hand. The four-armed man began to scream from the pain that he felt on himself. A moment later, there were already a bunch of ice spears near the monster. Wu clenched his fist and said it would be ice lightning. Ice lightning quickly attacked the monster that could not move. Standing near a pile of ice spikes, Wu wished for the monster to be reborn in heaven. A couple of minutes later, Wu stood near a puddle that emitted a strong unpleasant odor. Wu covered his nose from such a smell so as not to smell it. The guy asked if it was the first time Wu smelled such a smell, and Wu replied that the guy himself made a face. The guy replied that this was a different zone, and he already had some experience. The guy continued that in any case, the spectacle was what it needed, and some time ago it seemed like an illusion. The guy said he was glad to meet you and he also had similar skills, and Wu replied that he didn't want anything to do with him. The guy held out something and pretended that this thing would explain who he was. Wu found a transparent business card in the guy's hand, which he handed to him. On it, Wu saw that the guy was a magician Merlin, and an illusionist. Merlin said it was a shame he didn't get the chance to show Wu what he could do. Wu thought to himself that there was something suspicious about this guy. Wu asked that Merlin deal with the dude below. A green monster with huge fists stood on the ground and looked at the roof. The illusionist said that he even forgot about this thing. He also added that he would have no problem dealing with this. Merlin raised his hand and snapped his fingers. The illusionist tore off the head of the green monster in a moment. Wu asked what the illusionist was able to do to defeat him so. Merlin said that he could not say, and it would be nice if his abilities could be recognized in an instant, like the skills of Mr. Merlin also said that he would tell something else instead, that these monsters are a failed experiment. Wu asked if they were unsuccessful, then who were the successful ones, and Merlin replied that he did not have such information. He continued that a similar case happened a year ago in Ireland, and on that day a village in which they were peacefully engaged in sheep farming disappeared from the map. Wu asked about where this Ireland was, which the guy said about. But Wu suddenly asked if the whole village had disappeared, then why was the guy safe and sound? The illusionist replied that, like Wu saw, he could hide his body as much as he wanted. He also continued that even when the village collapsed and was buried underground, he was able to hide. Wu said that the guy should have told everything on the news, and the illusionist replied that he would have been considered crazy. Wu asked if the guy just left people to leave the world. Merlin replied that he could not even protect himself, and he had to start an investigation. And if this was done intentionally, then the instigator should not have lost his mind and started destroying everything indiscriminately. Wu asked who could have done this, and Merlin replied that he did not ask the people who fled from there. The illusionist added that he did everything in his power at that moment, and after that he never saw anything like it again. And later I found out about Wu through recommendations, because that's when we posted a new video. Merlin continued that he couldn't believe he was seeing this again in such a faraway place, like Asia, and couldn't think that was the same as the guy. The illusionist added that an ordinary person is not capable of this, and Wu replied that he did not want to mess with him. Merlin suggested that someone is conducting new research, and he missed something, and cannot ignore what is happening, but the truth is zero thoughts. Wu asked how he could have zero if he knew so much about these creatures, and the guy replied that they were different individuals, and therefore their abilities too. Wu thought to himself that it wasn't that he wasn't interested in monsters, but research and mass production are a completely different matter, and if something goes wrong, then there will be disaster. The guy said that he told everything that was necessary, and now he can ask a question. The illusionist said that Wu never told about their lair, and Wu replied that he himself did not know, and did not want to lie. The guy also asked how he managed to change his position, and does not think that we are talking about levitation here. Suddenly, we realized something, and asked if the guy was interested in his scroll. The illusionist did not understand what he was talking about, and asked what we was talking about. A scroll appeared behind Wu, and he said that he talked about it. The guy asked if this is movement between dimensions. He asked Wu how he managed to do this. Wu replied that it was not possible, and he would only remain silent. Wu added that as the guy said, they are not close enough yet. Later, the broadcast began, which was called an eyewitness investigation. In the chat they asked what kind of zombie they just saw. Someone explained to the chat that Chung Wu-kai met with an informant, and these zombies are failed experiments of a foreign laboratory. Wu said that he was going to explain everything, but conclusions had already been drawn for him. Wu also added that one cannot do anything here, because there are so many research centers in Korea. Wu also reassured the chat that he was fine for now, but the one who recorded the last time is also in danger. He also asked about what's wrong with someone streaming with him. They wrote in the chat that they would understand him if he gave up this business. Wu said it doesn't matter and he doesn't need to come to everyone's house, since they don't want to calm down. They wrote in the chat that they say that Jun Wu-kai has his own CGI team. Wu grabbed his head because of the slander being written in the chat. He was asked in the chat if he had a video with the informant. Wu told viewers that he has absolutely nothing. Wu slammed the table in anger to answer the audience. With his hand he began to summon some kind of monster made of cola. Wu asked to look at what the audience calls a zombie. When creating someone from water, Wu said that it was the one who told him that zombies were an experiment gone wrong. In the chat they found out that this water object is Merlin, and wrote about it. Wu asked the audience if they knew who Merlin was. He was told that this was a famous wizard, the white magician Merlin. That day was filled with exceeds. Wu asked what an exceed was and was told to Google it. They began to explain to him that Exceed is an Anglo-American streaming platform, and only DJs are invited there. And the prize fund is simply huge, and the winner will get everything he wants. For example, the winner of the first season was an adventurer and was able to get access to dangerous places and all the necessary equipment. Wu asked if Marlin was a foreigner, and he was told that he was and asked to be careful. Wu did not understand what the viewers were talking about, and they wrote to him that he would be banned if he advertised Exceed. The chat asked him to show something else, and Wu asked in response what he could show. Unexpectedly, Wu asked if the audience would like to actually meet him. He was offered a tour of the country, and Wu was interested in this idea. A moment later, Wu was trying to get something from under the table. Taking out the scroll, Wu said that there was something interesting for them today. Wu opened his scroll to show it to the audience. Wu asked where they would like to go in Korea. He was offered to go to the top of the Namsan Tower, and Wu replied that there was no place where he could not go. A few seconds later, Wu stood over the open scroll with the phone in his hands. Wu told viewers not to ask for this on the next stream. Wu fell under his portal, while still holding the phone. One of the spectators was surprised that he saw some unknown dimension. Wu asked the audience to wait a little longer, because almost everything is ready. He continued that as they wanted the top of Namsan Tower. Unexpectedly, Wu fell instead of ending up on top of the building. Wu screamed in fear that he had landed from the portal at the wrong point. Wu continued to fly and thought to himself that he would die at this rate. Wu shouted for his portal to open as soon as possible. The portal opened back up and Wu was heading straight into it. Wu flew into the portal and continued to hold the phone in his hands. He remembered the conversation, how Marlon asked that by chance this equipment did not come with Mr. Wu replied that he made it himself, and Marlon asked how. Wu replied that he didn't know, because in 500 years, he had succeeded only once. Marlon said that this was an artifact, not a unique ability, and asked if we would agree to sell it for a decent amount. Wu responded negatively, and Marlon offered a production commission. Wu said that he is not interested in this, and many curious people have recently divorced, but the thing is very valuable. Wu continued that he encountered the first monster after using the scroll, and if Marlon told him, then maybe he would tell him how to make the scroll. Marlon said that he had only just learned about the existence of such artifacts, and he had nothing to say, but if he found out, he would certainly tell. Wu thought to himself that if Marlon could get information from just one useless piece of paper, he would be grateful. Wu continued that with the help of this scroll one can go to any place, but with some restrictions, and now he could not leave Korea. He added that he can try to get out, but the space will get out of control. But if an ordinary person does this, then nothing will happen. And Wu asked why everyone was trying to get this scroll. Meanwhile, Wu was lying head down after landing in his home. Later, Wu was walking with Jinhee and said that he didn't want to go anywhere. Jinhee remembered that the old man said that Wu had to go. Wu replied that everything was correct, and her outfit added strength to him. Jinhee was embarrassed, and said that Wu was actually flattering her. Wu replied that it was nice to have a bright young girl next to him. Wu added that he invited her with him, and that's why he might not have enough salt today. Jinhee asked about the old man's employment, and Wu replied that he was the chairman of the Bongsan group of companies. Jinhee said that then she should have taken something else with her instead of a roll. Wu asked what was wrong with the roll, and Jinhee replied that he should have taken alcohol. Wu reassured her by saying that people like them just need to breathe. Jinhee asked if there were others like them, and Wu replied that of course there were, and Jin again asked if there were many of them. Wu replied that if there were too many of them, then the whole world would know, but the master keeps Korea closed to the majority. He continued that he thinks the fact is that the gentleman believes that if people like him start walking around the world, then innocent people will suffer. Suddenly, a white car with black windows drove up to Jin, He, and Wu. Gina came out and greeted Wu and Jinhee. Wu asked if she was from Yu's family, and Gina replied that she was the secretary of the chairman of Bongsun Group, Yu Gina. Wu added that their family has had the same face for all of them for 500 years. Gina said that she was pleased to meet Mrs. Kang Jinhee, and Wu asked if they had been taught for generations not to like him. Gina replied that she just heard a lot of stories as a child. After a while, the car was already near Tangen's residence. Later, Wu ran away saying that they had not seen each other for so long, and she immediately threw it. The woman said that since ancient times, salt was used to cleanse bad things that were brought into the house. Jinhee asked if she would also need to be sprinkled with salt. The woman replied that she came with Jun Wukai, so she would have to. Unexpectedly, the woman laughed out loud as she looked at Wu. The woman said that Wu recently contacted the unclean. Jinhee thought to herself that, as far as she remembers, the god of the hearth Chowan is associated with the kitchen, and asked out loud if she was the god Chowan. Chaga Chowan replied that it was exactly like that, and Jinhee said that it was customary to leave rice and cakes for her, and her grandmother sometimes did this before she died. Chowan replied that it was customary, but she was already tired of these rice cakes and could not stand them, and Jinhee apologized. Chowan continued that everything was fine, and she had nothing to do with the sacrifices, and asked how she was supposed to manage so many houses. Jinhee said that she is a goddess, and Chowan replied that she cannot really be called that, and she only lives in the world for a long time, like Wu. Chowan added that she has many different names because of her abilities, and asked if her name was Jinhee, and she replied that it was correct. The woman also said that she thought she would like the boy Tangan more, and unlike Wu, he is polite. Chowan added that Tangan is the owner of this house, and they came to meet him. Jinhee said that she heard Tangan for the first time. Wu told his friend that this is a problem, because for Jinhee the essence of the master is a secret. Chowan asked what this was all about, and if he was going to get married again. Tangan, who suddenly appeared, said that he was not going to. Later, sitting at the table, Chowan asked if Jinhee is not even his fiancée, then why would he hide his identity? Tangan asked in response, what good is it for her that she is blocking his marriage? Wu asked for an explanation of why they were called. Tangan said that they would discuss contributions to the children's entertainment industry, and asked what Wu was thinking when he showed the scrolls on his stream. Wu asked if everyone watched the 2 hours of the stream, and Tangan replied that scrolls are not a tool for attracting attention. Wu said he did it because he had an idea. Wu continued that Tangan will be able to find out thanks to the scroll, and the broadcasts are open, and so they will find him. Tangan asked if we wanted to tell him that he understood this, and was still being irresponsible. Wu said that he fought with them, and if this bothers him, then he alone cannot cope with 3. Chowan asked who told him that there were only 3 of them, and also asked that it was not the same informant. Wu said he didn't say that, and if they show up, he'll drag them here. Chowan started to get angry, and asked if he was aware of where they were now. She asked if he was going to bring these creatures into her house. Wu tried to reassure Chowan that there were people right there. Unexpectedly, Wu attacked her with his water to calm her fire. Tangan asked them to stop and remove both fire and water. Chowan said that he knows her strength and the house will not burn down, and Tangan replied that Jinhee and Gina are here, and if they get caught, then there will be trouble. Wu said he took back his words and asked his friend to calm down. Gina explained to Jinhee that Mrs. Chowan takes her home very seriously, and there is no need to joke like that. Chowan apologized for being a jerk, and said that she wouldn't hurt innocent people, and Jinhee said that everything was fine. Tangan asked if Wu was going to continue using the scroll on his streams. Wu said that he had already made a list of who wants to meet with him, and Chowan said that this world can no longer be saved. Wu told his friend that he was actually very popular. Tangan said that if this is the conversation, then if it is possible, then Jinhee should not walk alone for a while. Tangan told Jinhee to contact Gina, and they would assign people to her, in case of emergency, at least this Wu. Jinhee asked that it turns out that you can't even go to the store alone, and she was told that you can't go anywhere at all. Wu asked what was wrong, and why they were doing this to her. Gina replied that, not to mention the monsters that appear, lately the master has been losing contact with everyone he looked after. Wu said they were just traveling, and asked about the number of people, and Gina answered 20. Gina added that 20 people are considered missing, others like Jun Wukai. Wu asked, in that case, how is this related to Jinhee? Gina told him that such measures were needed because of the Goshen sect. She continued that there was a possibility that Mrs. Kang Jinhee's mother had connections to the cult she was obsessed with. Gina added that once they started the investigation, they didn't have any guesses for a whole year. And about half of those people disappeared, and their internal investigations department discovered many points of intersection between cultists and incidents. Tangan said that it is necessary to study the matter in more detail, and it is unknown what dangers await them, so he asks them to be united. He asked if Jinhee's mother returned home, safe and sound. Jinhee said that there are days when she comes back. But the scroll that she returned to Jun Wukai, and when she said that she threw it away, she got very angry, and that she should pray harder for her. Chawin said that now that the scroll was shown on the stream, Kang Jinhee is now the most dangerous. Wu said that even if the scroll is not in their hands, they will still think that there is a way to get close to Jun Wukai. Gina said that they would put people on Jinhee's parents, and she thanked her for that. Jin He also asked that speaking about the missing ones, are they the same as Jun Wukai, and do they have unusual abilities? Gina replied that everything is true, and all these people do not obey the laws of our world. Wu said that he is not like that, and maybe just a little bit the same. Gina added that, like Chung Wukai, they do not stay in one place, but mostly wander around. Gina continued that dozens of people have never disappeared, in such a short period of 2 years. Wu understood what was going on and why he was called so often lately. Wu added that if they had told him right away, he would have understood everything. Tang Un said that Wu is not one of those who would just listen, and if it had nothing to do with Jin He, then he would just go back and forth, and then disappear without a trace. Wu asked where it was said that he would certainly disappear, and added that they did not know his abilities. Tang Un suggested that those 20 people disappeared, because they turned out to be worse than him. Wu asked about who was missing in the end, for that matter. Tang Un cited the example of Che Wudo, who also disappeared like the other 19. Wu said that this is the one who raised the guerrilla army after the Japanese wars invaded, and added that this is his friend. Tang Un stated that Wu did not even know that Chai Wudo, or Quack Shu, was missing, and said that they were friends, and Wu replied that meeting once every 10 years is also friendship. Tang Un said that Che Wudo had recently led a special forces group, and was quite strong, although weaker than him. Meanwhile, on her phone, Jin He started googling something. She read that Quang Shu existed from 1552 to 1617, and an outstanding commander. Gina said that everything was correct, and according to history, Kwak Cheyu had already died, and Jin He asked if this was possible. Gina replied that Jun Wukai was with them now, and in good health. Tang Un said that Che Wudo disappeared just recently, and now they are also in danger, and would like to call everyone to report the situation, and ask for help. Wu said that there is no one who would obey Tang Un's better than him. Chowan said that the 500-year-old child has almost lost his head. Wu asked her in response, twisting his face, if she should finally calm down. Chowan got angry and replied that if he pisses her off, she will fry him. Tang Un told the obedient one, as Wu called himself, to follow him. Tang Un began to walk down the steps, while Wu stood there in disbelief. Tang Un pointed with his finger for Wu to join him. After a short period of time, they were already walking next to each other. Wu said that Tang Un scared him, and asked what Tang Un wanted to tell him alone. Tang Un replied that he needed to hear one thing first, and asked how much of what Wu said on the stream was true. Tang Un continued that he was talking about an informant and asked if Wu didn't say that a foreign magician had contacted him. Wu stood in slight surprise at the words Tang Un said. Tang Un said that they had discussed this, and asked if he was wrong. Wu replied that he had already said everything he knew, but in fact, he was a little in doubt. Tang Un asked if Wu wanted to say that he did not make anything up, and even that an entire village disappeared abroad. Wu replied that he didn't make it up, and that's what the burner told him too. Tang Un got angry because Wu posted this during the broadcast. Wu replied that he didn't know how true it was and thought it would be just a perfect story for streaming. Tang Un stopped and calmed down a little after Wu's words. Wu continued that if he had originally known about what he just heard, he would have called Tang Un first. Tang Un said that if he dies from anger, it will be Wu's fault. Wu joked that Tang Un has nowhere to die at the moment. Wu remembered something, and said that snowball's name was Merlin, and he was just like them. Tang Un said that he wanted to ask about it, but Wu beat him to it. Wu also added that as soon as he saw Tang Un today, he immediately wanted to tell him, but he was prevented by the salt bombardment. Tang Un asked what kind of strength this Merlin has, in that case. Wu replied that on the stream they told him that Merlin was a magician, and they also said that he was an illusionist. Wu also said that he seems to be able to completely block out others' sound in a specific range. Tang Un asked if he could only block the Zok, or something else. Wu continued that Merlin does not fight in close combat, and his attacks are invisible, and can make a large hole without moving, and when he blocked the sound, he pressed the clock. Tang Un said that if his name is really Merlin, Then he is already quite old. He continued that the clock appeared much later, so unlike the wood scroll, it is simply a device that is used for concentration. Wu asked if Merlin was famous, that even Tang En knew about him. Tang En replied that this is one of the most famous stories in the world. This is the English legend of the Night King, and we can watch a film about it. Wu replied that it infuriates him to watch foreign films with subtitles, and Tang En replied that Merlin was also in that legend, and maybe they were lucky. Wu said that what Merlin did was not a trick, and it was reality. Tang En asked if it was similar to his Taoist art, and Wu responded positively. Tang En added that Wu's ability is to be a pain in the ass. Tang En also said that the number appeared to be British, and asked if Wu had tried to call it. Wu replied that he didn't try, so he didn't know, and Tang En asked if Merlin called him. Wu replied that Merlin said he would call if he knew anything else, and he didn't have to do it first. Tang En angrily asked what Wu was doing that day. Tang En also asked why Wu erased all traces of the incident. He added that he was told by the Environmental Improvement Department that there were many traces of the battle left, but all the bodies had disappeared. Wu asked if Tang En really thought that he would do such tedious work. Tang En asked who did it, in that case. Looking at Merlin's business card, Tang En asked if it was really him. Wu asked in this case, that if not him, then who else, and added that he did not think that this would happen. Tang En asked if Wu even monitored the progress of the evacuation. Wu replied that if Tang En had exchanged a few words with him, he would have understood that Merlin simply ran away, without even saying goodbye. Wu also asked that who knew that he would show up, and added that he didn't suspect anything, but Tang En would also be surprised. Wu continued that it is impossible to know everyone who penetrates them from abroad, and they also met in such a place, and quite naturally he was confused. Wu asked Tang En's friend if he had recovered, and Tang En replied that he was recovering. Tang En added that it looked like he was attacked by two monsters at once. Wu said that means they can communicate with each other, and about this Wu thought that it turns out that this was not Merlin's attack. Tang En asked Wu if he had any ideas based on all this. Wu said he had no ideas, and apologized that it turned out like this. Tang En said that the scene of the incident was dangerous, so he needed to find others, and make sure they were okay, and ask them for help. Wu asked if Tang En really thought they were willing to cooperate. Tang En ordered Wu to go to the Environmental Improvement Department and help there. Wu asked why they suddenly started talking about it. Tang En replied that it would be better for his own safety, and he would also have money, which he loves so much. Wu replied that he did not want to because he would die from stress. Tang En said that this is just to monitor the situation in case something goes wrong. Wu said if there are two of him, then there is nothing to lose now. They started talking to each other about whether it might be better for them to voluntarily surrender to the kidnappers, and explore the monsters, and this Merlin. They continued that if they get at least something, then good, and there they will be able to get to the truth. Later, Wu sat at his computer, and looked through his email. One of the messages was with the title, that his subscriber works in intensive care. Wu thought to himself that he had a bad feeling about something. The letter said that two incidents had happened last week, that he could not explain. Both patients were rescued from different places of the collapse, and their wounds were caused by wild animals. And upon regaining consciousness, the patients began to claim that they had seen a monster. The letter added that it was enclosing a photo that one of the victims managed to take. Wu called Gina and asked if they were in complete chaos there right now. Gina replied that she did not understand what we was talking about. Wu asked if their Environmental Improvement Department was making a fuss. Gina thanked for your concern, and they are already working on it, and the problem will be resolved within today. Wu said that although he refused to work under the old man, they couldn't let people get hurt. Gina replied that he was right, and Wu said that if the monsters showed up, he would deal with them, and they would keep it a secret from the old man. Gina asked how he would do this, and Wu replied that if he started working with them, his streams would be immediately blocked. Gina asked why on earth he wants her to ignore. Wu replied that she should stay put, because he would be there soon. With his foot, Wu stepped over the portal to enter Gina. The portal closed and Wu said that this is just cool, after all. Gina said it's disgusting to invade another person's personal space so easily. We replied that the chief's secretaries had used this office for generations, and Gina asked how he knew about this. We replied that he wouldn't know, because he is the smartest of the old man's charges. Wu also said that this is the first time he has seen someone young like her as the head. Gina said that it is impossible to keep something secret from the master, and Wu replied that no one believes that his streams are reality anyway. Gina asked if he had told Wu about this letter before. Wu replied that he told his friend how it really was, and asked for help. Gina said that people don't accept things like that so easily, and they should take care of this person too. Wu asked why complicate things, when there is such a simple way. Gina replied that it sounded unconvincing, and understood when Wu uses magic during the broadcast, and asked why stream battles with monsters. We replied that it was all because viewers asked him to do so. Showing off his phone, Wu said that videos with monsters are in much greater demand than without them. Wu added that in Incheon he encountered a madman who often watches him, and Gina realized that he was talking about Merlin. Gina thought that if just one of the others saw the video and contacted them, maybe they could keep him out of harm's way. Gina said that if Wu streams, she hopes it won't be live. Wu told Gina that he was not that thoughtless. Later, while in the portal, Wu said that this time the destination is a large center in Daegu. Gina said to avoid huge damage if possible, and Wu replied that he would try. Jinhee said she thought it would be unfinished, because they were told it was a shopping center under construction. Wu guessed that a fortune had been invested in this shopping center. Wu said he was told to be careful, but he doesn't know if it will work. Wu continued that it's not easy, but he has to try, and first he needs to find a safe shelter for Jinha. Wu also said that she doesn't need to follow him, just make it to minute video. Jinhee took the camera, and said that the light in this building is bad, so it will be difficult to achieve a clear picture, even after installation. Wu said that Secretary Yu and the others would like it. Jinhee said she will try to edit the video to make it easier for people to watch. They saw a monster in the distance, and Jinhee shouted for Wu to watch. Wu saw the monster and jumped from the place where they were standing together. Wu said he already has an idea of what will happen in the comments. Wu thought to himself that the monsters were very primitive, but could communicate with each other. In this case, do monsters have their own selves, and if so, how developed is it? A monster that looked like a sea monster screamed, and tears came from his eyes. With his scream he destroyed something that was in front of him. From such a cry, Wu covered his ears, and sat around the corner. The monster hit something and stopped screaming because of it. Looking at this, Wu asked what kind of seizure he was having. Wu, coming out of the corner, said that he could no longer just stand and watch. Wu with streams of water, said, rotation of the piercing stream of water. Wu said unpleasantly that it was so ridiculous, but the public liked it. Earlier, Wu recalled how viewers asked him to come up with a name for his abilities. Wu, standing in front of the monster, said that when an ability has a name, it is easier to control. Wu directed his water, and spoke of the rotation of the piercing stream of water. Streams of water hit the monster, but failed to cause damage. After the blow, the monster screamed and with its sound knocked everything out of the way. Covering his ears, Wu shouted that it would be better to fight with his fists, 100 times. Wu began to call upon the rotation of the piercing stream, but changed his mind and made an ice spear. The monster began to run towards Wu, while continuing to scream. Wu said that it's good that the monster is so big, and if he touches it, it will pierce him. Wu made a spear and pointed it directly at the monster, waiting for its attack. Wu stabbed the monster right in the stomach with his spear. But the attack again failed to inflict a scratch on the monster. Wu shouted, because he had never seen such a body ability as his. Wu knocked the monster down and a very loud sound was made throughout the mall. Jinhee started to get very nervous about Wu's condition because of that sound. The doppelganger asked Jinhee if he should take her outside. Jinhee said that there is no need, everything is fine with her. Wu said he couldn't use the scroll because it was just a copy of himself. But he could take her to the old man and the others, and there she could wait safely, until it was all over. He continued that she shouldn't linger here, and the video is already enough, and these creatures may appear later, so they'll film something again. Jinhee replied to stop making her useless. Clone Wu looked at how upset Jinhee was, and lowered the camera. Suddenly, something big and icy appeared in the very center. The real Wu jumped onto the platform where Jinhoo and the clone were. Wu said they almost collided, and the clone asked if Wu did it. The clone asked where the ice came from and Wu replied that his attacks didn't work. Wu continued that the monster is covered with some strange scales, and he is not able to break through it. He continued that what's more surprising is that he doesn't even have a clue what his body is made of. The clone asked what Wu did to the monster, and Wu replied that he froze it, and that was the most he could do. Suddenly, the monster began to climb out of the ice, not wanting to give up. Wu also said that in any case, he was just trying to buy time. Wu said that Jinhoo needs to be taken to a safe place. He continued, if he starts moving, she might get hurt. With Jinhoo on his shoulders, he jumped and approached the top of the building. Wu began to call something out of the water, calling it a rotation of piercing. But he stopped, saying that such a name was not suitable. Wu added that it is better to call it a water arrow. The arrow pierced the roof of the building and Wu continued to fly to save Jinhoo. Wu got out of the building with Jinhoo, and began to slide along the roof. Meanwhile, the monster escaped from the ice dome that was holding him back. Wu asked if she had been filming all this time, and Jinhoo answered positively. Wu also asked if she was scared when they flew together. Jinhoo said that it was difficult for her to answer, because it wasn't the building that collapsed. Jinhoo asked if she could film from here, and Wu replied that Secretary Yu and the others were setting up camp further. At the same time, the monster began to crawl across the ice, which Wu did. Jinhoo shouted for Wu to be careful, because there was something behind him. While creating something out of water, Wu replied that it wasn't him he had to worry about, but her. A pile of ice water flew back into the building, through the roof. Wu sealed the roof, turning the water into ice so that the monster could not escape. But the ice cracked and Wu shouted for Jinhoo to follow him quickly. He also said that the monster is not weak at all, because he was able to easily break the ice. To himself, Wu also thought that it was impossible for Jinhee to try. Wu attacked the monster that was flying straight out of the building towards them. Wu hit the monster on the head with his foot, and told him to go to him. From Wu's blow, the monster was sealed to the nearest wall from them. Wu asked why the monster did it anyway, because he broke a bone and didn't make a sound, but it seems that because of this battle, Wu has surpassed himself. Wu also said that he wanted to attack him instantly, like this blonde Merlin. Wu said that the monster had already lost, and if he did not die from one blow, then we would beat until the monster left the world. He also said that if you just leave it here there will be problems. The monster has already prepared for the attack and battle that awaits them. Behind Wu stood Jinhoo, who continued to film what was happening. Wu was surprised that the monster began to increase in size. The monster suddenly ran towards where Wu was standing. But as it turned out, Wu was not the target that the monster was interested in. The monster headed towards where the defenseless Jinhee stood. Wu thought to himself that the monster needed to be tied up, and stopped. He said that the monster was boiling and was about to explode, and asked him to stop where he was. The monster was already near Jinhee, and was inflating more and more. The monster exploded and some liquid came out of it. Jinhee began to fall, and Wu began to become very nervous about her condition. Wu tried to catch her, but she did not continue to fall down. The guy in the hood who was near them asked how the monster was doing, if he died. Wu asked who he was, and the guy replied that he was not a bad person, and on their side, and asked about the well-being of Madam Producer. Wu said he didn't think it was heavy, but when he carried it on his shoulder, he definitely felt human weight. The guy in the hood opened up, and said it was his ability to control gravity